if I'm looking, I should be looking to see, do I like to read? Do I like to study the Bible? Is it something that when I've had the opportunity to speak to a group of 10-year-old boys, there were still at least 7 of them listening by the time I finished my talk.
Let's talk about calling and gifting, and let's go back to your own sense of this. When did you have a sense you were called to ministry?
It's hard actually for me to answer that question in terms of a moment in time. I know that in terms of the issue of pastoral ministry itself, I can articulate that, and I will. But you know, I love the hymn, you know, that talks about unnumbered comforts to my soul, your tender care bestowed before my infant heart conceived, from whom those comforts flowed. I mean, I had a grandmother who prayed for me from the Highlands of Scotland. I had parents who prayed for me. Pastors were often in my home as a small boy, and I was influenced by their example and intrigued by what they did. And I just mention all of that because I think in almost a subliminal way that something was even sketched in a charcoal way into my psyche. It wasn't something that I aspired to in any way at all. And even after I ended up studying theology, I was pretty convinced that whatever I would do in serving God would not involve pastoral ministry. That I had worked with friends from Campus Crusade for Christ. I was involved in music ministry, sports things. And part of me would think about it in terms of, you know, what if I met my friends from the grammar school and I had to tell them that I was a pastor? Goodness gracious. You know, you could get away with saying I'm working for Ambassadors in Sport and whatever it is. Well, in the course of life, as I was studying at LST and doing work with young people on weekends, we would go like down to the south coast of England to Bournemouth and to sing some songs and do some talks, and it was fun. You know, you went on Friday, you came home on Sunday, and life began again on Monday. Well, by the time we were into 1975 and I'd had a fair run of this, and I was getting close to the time when I would actually graduate and actually get married, I hadn't a clue where I was going or what I was doing. And one morning, one lunchtime, I volunteered to whoever was listening that I decided that I didn't like these weekend things anymore. And one of the lecturers, a fellow by the name of John Balchin, was sitting at the table. He had thick glasses, like Coca-Cola kind of glasses, and he would squeeze his eyes together when he spoke. And he reached forward and he said in his English accent, and I can tell you exactly why that is. I said, okay. He said, that is because God has given you a pastor's heart. If he gave you the heart of an evangelist, it wouldn't be a concern to you. You would be able to go, you would leave, you would go to another place. Because what I had said was, I don't like meeting people on Friday, leaving them on Sunday. And he said, yeah, because God has put in your heart to stay somewhere. Well, that was both like a huge motorway opening up in front of me and a death knell sounding simultaneously. And I remember I left lunch and I went back to my room and I wept. I wept because I said, but that's not who I am. That's not what I can do. I don't do that. And anyway, I'm 23 years old, and so what? He thinks that. What am I supposed to do? And then that is when everything began to roll out in a way that I had no control over. That was when Derek Prime had written to the principal of the college saying, my assistant is about to leave. Do you have anybody there? Surprisingly, Gilbert Kirby said me, which led to Derek, which then led to me going as the assistant to the pastor, not the assistant pastor. And the reason I was the assistant to the pastor is because I wasn't a pastor. And so the question was, will then the sense of potential pastoral ministry be resolved within the context of the local congregation, or will it dissipate? Will this be something along the journey of life and will go on? Well, after 12 months, then the elders came and said, we want to ordain you to the gospel ministry. That was in 1976, the second Sunday in October. And when I went through that ordination process and actually wore a clerical collar on the Sunday morning, because in Scotland that was still par for the course. I mean, when I put that clobber on and stood up there and made those affirmations, there was no way back from that for me. And if they'd asked me to stand up stark naked, it wouldn't have been any more daunting, quite honestly. And so there's a sense in which, for me, that subjective reality only grew when somebody gave me an opportunity to be in that framework. I had determined that I must follow Jesus somehow, because what I'd wanted to be was a lawyer. I thought, I could play a lot of golf and probably have fun. And that had been taken away. But this subjective sense of, on the one hand, temerity or fearfulness, with the encouragement of those who are outside of you, who are more mature than you, and who have had enough experience in the gospel and in church life not to lay hands on any man suddenly, especially not a young 23-year-old or 24-year-old boy, as it turned out, because I was then to be there only one more year before I was called to a church on my own.
So it sounds like this is a process that may be birthed with interest or desire, but there's a period of confirmation. It's not just one person saying, I think this is what I'd like to be, and now you're called to be a pastor.
Yeah, no, it's not that. And the idea that, the call of God is just a general call to everybody, and therefore you should be, I don't subscribe to that. I think Spurgeon was onto something when he said, if you can stay out, stay out. Mm-hmm. Because the only thing that really keeps you is that sense of having been set to it, that you are a conscript rather than a volunteer. It hasn't been against your will, but nevertheless, it has been the sublimation of your will to the will of God. Yeah, no, I think that's right, Bob. Yeah, the sense of, on the one hand, if anyone desires this, and yet at the same time is saying, no, but I don't think I should be doing this. Yeah. Somewhere in that tension, mm-hmm. I think, is the place of progress.
And the willingly but not under compulsion that 1 Peter 5 comes up with.
Yeah.
Do we look for external validation as we're sensing a call? And if so, what are we looking for?
Well, I say to the young men here, if they're, there's a young fellow who's on our team now, Sam from Nigeria. I met him in the corridor, 3 years ago, and I said, hey, who are you and what are you doing? He's an engineer and he's from Nigeria. What are you doing with your life? He said, well, I don't know, but I think I've got aspirations for maybe ministry, pastoral ministry. And I can't remember where I suggested he went, but probably the nursery or something like that, just to test his attitude and whether he had a genuine interest in serving. So yeah, that element I think is vitally important, that we ought to be constantly not just testing the spirits, but testing the motives of our hearts. Because sometimes from the outside, something that is fairly daunting can look relatively attractive. And that, again, is where I think in the context of a local church, that's whether the notion is birthed there, I think that is the best context in which people who know us and will speak honestly to us. I mean, I could announce one morning I was planning on being a brain surgeon. That wouldn't last for 5 minutes because people would say, you're not clever enough to be a brain surgeon. You might be a garbage collector, but you're not going to be a brain surgeon. So, and then somebody who couldn't put 6 sentences together, unless God is about to come and dramatically change something in this character, then the chances of him being useful in the delivery of material is not impossible, but it is unlikely.
And you and I have both met young men who had a desire, but as we looked, we thought, I'm not sure the gifting is there.
Yeah, both gift and attitude. You know, I've had a number of people here who have MDivs that went, they're now employed in business. And the reason they're employed in business is because whatever led them to go and do a Master of Divinity degree, it was not to the end that they would end up in pastoral ministry. I don't think that they have suffered from that, and maybe they're good in home Bible studies and things. But no, there's definitely a difference.
And with gifting, what should somebody be looking for?
Well, somebody came to me a long time ago and said, how'd you start a radio ministry? I want one. I said, well, the first thing you do is you don't want to start a radio ministry. And the fellow thought I was nuts at that point. I think the notion of Isaiah 66:2, this is the one to whom I will look, says the Lord. He is humble, contrite in spirit, trembles at my word. That sense of awesomeness or attitudinally, that matters even more than giftedness, because the congregation's need in our lives is not ultimately our giftedness, but our godliness. That God blesses, you know, He blesses holy living. He blesses these things. And so we ought to be looking for somebody. If I'm looking, I should be looking to see, do I like to read? Do I like to study the Bible? Is it something that when I've had the opportunity to speak to a group of 10-year-old boys, there were still at least 7 of them listening by the time I finished my talk. Am I a little fearful of it, but do I aspire to do it? Do people respond and say, I learned something there, or that was good, or whatever? You're looking for some indication that, that what you're doing has not just value to it, but has content to it and makes an impact. So the ability to speak, if you're going to be a preacher, the ability to read, to study, to deal with people, because what we need to do is teach the Bible and love the people. And so if we don't love people, then we probably don't know how to get ourselves involved in something like a local church, where you get some of the strangest people you ever met in your life, starting with yourself. So, yeah, because a local church is not for me a group of people that you just immediately say, oh, I'd love to go on vacation with all of you. I don't think most of the people in the church want to go on vacation with me either, so I don't feel bad about it.
When you open the church door, you're inviting everyone in, aren't you?
Yeah, railway stations, libraries, and churches, yeah, they're all there.